Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Meriwether and Tharp, your source for Georgia divorce. Find them online at georgiadivorceteam.com.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
Good morning, DawgNation, and welcome to DawgNation Daily, at least sort of still in the normal 10 a.m. slot for DawgNation Daily, but today we're going to do something a little bit different. This is going to be a special edition episode of DawgNation at Large. I know a lot of you out there don't watch the other DawgNation shows and watch DawgNation Daily, and that's totally fine. Brandon Adams is the best at what he does, but this is a good opportunity for us to show you guys what we typically do in our Thursday night 7:30 slot with me, Connor Riley, and Cody Chaffins. Now, I want to be very clear about what to expect. You can't recreate what it is that Brandon Adams does on DawgNation Daily. The way we approach things is different. We talk a lot about Georgia football, but we also talk about a lot of other things. So I wanted to give you guys a heads up on what to expect from today's show. Now, I'll tell you something I didn't expect this morning. I hate surprises. Don't like surprise parties. That's just never been me, but we were very surprised this morning to learn that Connor was going to come in person today and film with us, and if I would have known, I wouldn't have worn heels.
Yeah, I'm surprised too, because the fabulous intro we just heard said we're going to be joined by Brandon Adams of DawgNation Daily, and he's not here right now.
Yeah, well, we've kind of covered that this week, that we would be substitute teaching, pinch hitting for him. I think they get the gist, but I still just, I had this whole thing planned out, and now you're here, and now we got to change some things. But, I mean, I guess that's what DawgNation at Large is really all about, is you have to expect the unexpected, right? I
mean, sure, I changed up the coverage, but you have to trust your play and still run that based regardless of what the defense calls.
And with that, let's go ahead and start DawgNation at Large.
It's the show for the new breed of Georgia Bulldog fan. This is DawgNation at Large with DawgNation insiders Connor Riley and Kaylee Mansell.
All right, if you've been with us on Thursday nights before, we're so happy to have you back. And if this is your first time experiencing DawgNation at Large, I'm excited for you. I'm excited for us. But let's go ahead and tell you what we got going on today's show. So we're going to start with Clemson, Game 1, a game that I think is being overlooked, but is a solid opener for the Dogs. Then we're going to do a segment that we call Dog Bites. It's our own version of Part of the Interruption. We'll cover a variety of topics. And then UGA is saying that the Alabama game from last year isn't a motivation going into this season, but it's hard to overlook. And then we're going to end with a segment that we like to do on DawgNation at Large called Tired versus Wired. But we're going to go ahead and start with Game 1, Clemson. I feel like just because the strength of schedule, especially the away half for Georgia's schedule, is so difficult that everybody's kind of forgetting about that Game 1 slot. Do you feel the same way?
Yes and no. I think part of it comes down to the fact that Clemson is just not what it has used to been. The last time Georgia opened against Clemson in 2021, Clemson was the higher-ranked team. They were the team with the playoff pedigree. Clemson has not been in the playoff in each of the last 3 seasons. And, I think they're one of the teams that could really benefit from a 12-team playoff this year. Mm-hmm. But they have a lot of questions going into this. They go 9-4 last year. Yes, they end the season on a 5-game winning streak, but Georgia's nearly a 2-touchdown favorite going into this game, and I think there'd be a lot of people out there disappointed if Georgia doesn't go out and really take care of a Clemson team that, while it should still have a very good defense, has a lot of questions about it on the offensive side of the ball, even with offensive coordinator Garrett Riley coming back, even with quarterback Cade Klubnik returning as well. Yeah,
even though the overall hype around this game has changed from what it was 3 years ago, I still think that it's the perfect game for UGA to open up with, because it's going to allow them to display their dominance early on and prove to everyone that's been talking about them in the offseason that this team is exactly what everyone thinks they're going to be.
Well, and you look at Georgia's success, especially when it comes to winning national championships. They opened the 2021 season against Clemson. That was a huge 10-3 victory, sort of making a statement with that defense there that day that they were going to be one of the all-time great units. And then in 2022, they open up against Oregon in Atlanta, where this game against Clemson will be played. Mm-hmm. And Georgia puts out one of its best performances that season. And when we talked to players after the fact, they said, we wanted to go out there and make a statement against Oregon and let people know that, hey, there's no fall off with this program. And they're going to have a chance again to do that against Clemson this year. While, yes, it's a noon kickoff, and I know a lot of people aren't thrilled with that, A lot of eyeballs are going to be on that game. I think the only game that maybe kind of competes with it in week 1 is that USC-LSU game. That's on a Sunday night. There are going to be a lot of people interested in this game, and Georgia's probably going to enter the season as the #1 team in the country. And they've got a chance to go out there against a still good Clemson team and I think really make a statement about what this team is going to be about and what this team can possibly do.
And I think the players also want to make a statement. When we got the chance to talk to Malachi Starks at SEC Media Days regarding his overall thoughts on Clemson as the opener, this is what Malachi Starks had to say.
It's competitive, and as a competitor, I love it. There's nothing better than to face a good team. We got a bunch of good teams on our schedule. They just happen to be one of them. So I'm excited to see what we can do. And one of my friends I went to high school with, Sammy Brown, is down there now, so it's going to be exciting to go back and forth with him.
I think it's very evident that UGA is embracing the idea of opening up with a competitor such as Clemson. Even though I know a lot of people like that first game to be in Sanford Stadium, I would rather see Georgia play a Power 5 opponent in a neutral site than a UT Martin at Sanford Stadium, and I think it makes it more entertaining for the players as well. Yeah,
look, when they're not opening up against a big team like they did last year or like they're going to next year when they open up against Marshall, I think that they say, we always try and treat these games the same. But when they play a Clemson, when they play an Oregon, down the line, if they play a Florida State and Ohio State, you're going to hear them express that level of excitement. And specifically with Clemson, this is a team where, they're weird in the rivalry pecking order when it comes to Georgia. They've played Clemson more than they've played Tennessee. I know as a North Georgia person,
I knew that you
value that Tennessee rivalry a good bit. But Georgia-Clemson still means a lot to people. They've played some iconic games in the past, 15 years now, technically. 2013, when that was a top 10 game. 2014, Todd Gurley and Nick Chubb having breakout performances that day. And then the 2021 game, obviously, being a launching point for that 2021 season. These teams battle a lot together on the recruiting trail. Obviously, Malachi Starks goes to Georgia. Sammy Brown goes to Clemson from the same Jefferson High School there. They compete over a lot of the same recruits. They are in a lot of the same recruiting footprint. And I think value the same sort of things from a character standpoint there. Now, obviously, they go about recruiting in a very different manner. But I think that the similarities that exist in some regard between Georgia and Clemson only heighten the expectations going into this game. There's a lot of overlap there. There are a ton of Metro Atlanta people that either considered going to Georgia or Clemson. And so because of that, I think that there's this added layer of excitement from a fan base perspective, in addition to the obvious player part of it as well, where you're opening against a team you could certainly see down the line in the college football playoff.
Yeah, also from a fan and a player perspective, this is going to be a good battle test for a lot of the younger guys, too, especially in that secondary group. Kirby Smart spoke on that also at SEC Media Days. Here's what Kirby Smart had to say about the game opener versus Clemson.
Dealing with new challenges this year, we don't have a chip on our shoulder in terms of people trying to use that as motivation. I've never used a failure from the previous year as motivation, and I've never used the success of a previous year as motivation. We won't do that this year. That's not who we are. We want to recreate ourselves, to say, in the best light we can. And this team has been fun to coach.
So actually, that is something that we're going to preview a little bit later. We do have the clip that we were referring to. I think that we can go ahead and get that up now.
We've got some good, young, talented players in the secondary. It's going to be really important they grow up fast. They're going to go against a really high-tempo offense in Clemson to start with. Our job is to prepare them. They get to go against a really good offense day in and day out with Carson Beck. So I'm excited about the guys we have in that room, and they'll step up to play. We have some experience at the safety position between Dan and Malachi, but it'll be the nickel position and the depth at those positions that's really critical.
Yeah, Kirby says there that it's their job to prepare them, but I also just think that a game like Clemson in the opener, nothing's going to prepare them more for a tough SEC schedule than an opponent like that.
Right. There's this idea that exists when you're not playing great teams or teams you can easily overpower, that you don't necessarily need to show all your cards and you can play things pretty close to the best. Clemson's a good enough team to where they don't fit that mold. You're going to have to go out there and play your best. And when you play Alabama at the end of September, when you play Texas in the middle of October, you want to have, I think, some known entities, especially when you consider those games are going on the road. And so that you get this game in a neutral site environment. Well, yes, it's not Sanford Stadium. it is something that is going to be a little bit unique and a little bit different, even though Georgia's obviously played a ton of games in Atlanta in recent years. I think having that early on in the season is going to help this Georgia team grow up and mature a little bit, because they're going to walk into a hostile environment when they go up to Kentucky in the middle of September, and then at the end of September they go into Alabama, and they're going to at least have some things answered by then. They might not have all the answers, but they might know what might not work rather than what exactly we're going to be in that secondary going forward.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the questions that I had to answer last week were about UGA's secondary, and I think it's interesting that he references them specifically in this right here, because he said earlier this year that age doesn't necessarily guarantee you a spot. If you're good enough, you're old enough, so this is a good chance to see some of the younger guys at the cornerback position. Who are you hoping to see get some quality playing time in that game?
I think the most interesting guy right now is KJ Bolden, based on what Kirby Smart said at SEC Media Days, based on obviously this dismissal of David Daniel, and just sort of where Georgia is from a safety position. Look, KJ Bolden, 5-star prospect. A lot of people expect a lot of things of him, but I think going into a season, I don't recall a time where Kirby has intentionally hyped up a player like that, where, especially early on, they're going to need him. Now, obviously, Dan Jackson is going to play a lot in that first game, I think, for Georgia there. We've seen that time and time again. But they need KJ Bolden to step up and get some reps in that game, and I'm really interested in seeing how he plays. Obviously, Malachi Starks had that big leaping interception against Oregon a few years ago, sort of announcing himself to the college football world. And so when Kirby compares and says KJ Bolden is farther along than Malachi Starks is at the same point in time in their respective careers, we know what Malachi Starks did in that first game in Atlanta. I'm really interested in seeing what KJ is able to possibly go out there and do.
I also do want to bring this up. I'm glad that this game is being played in Mercedes-Benz Stadium, because UGA's record now in Mercedes-Benz is 6-5. Still a winning record, but considering that's their own backyard and almost like it should be this home field advantage, I do feel like in some sense there's like a hump that needs to be gotten over. And considering that the SEC championship, I know you're looking at me like you don't agree, and I'll allow you to stand on business, but I'm glad that we play there in game one, because we're going to be back hopefully for the SEC championship, and I think it would be good to go ahead and get over that loss that happened last time in Mercedes-Benz Stadium and move on to a new chapter.
I believe all 5 of those losses are against Alabama.
They're not. Also LSU.
LSU in 2019.
One of the greatest teams of all time.
That's right. Excuse me. Yeah, so 4 of those losses are against Alabama. Non-Alabama teams in that building, I believe they're 6-1, if I have that correct. I don't think there's any bad juju associated with Georgia playing in Atlanta. You have the Ohio State win there. You have that Oregon win in a similar environment. I'm not superstitious. I am a little stitious. But I don't think that this team is going to be afraid of or worried about the aura in Mercedes-Benz Stadium that day, because, one, like, Clemson's not all that much farther from Atlanta than Georgia is. It's about 2 hours from Clemson. It's about an hour and a half from Athens. And so while, yes, there are going to be more Georgia fans there at that game because Georgia's just a larger fan base than Clemson, I don't worry at all about Georgia's history in that building. It's much more, to me, an Alabama-related issue than it is a Mercedes-Benz Stadium issue. And
that's fine that you make that point. I get it. But I'm glad that it's happening sooner rather than later, so it's not just like a whole year and the last time, or you're going into that stadium and the last thing that you have of a memory in there is that loss to Alabama when realistically you should have won that game. So I think that this is a good way to get over that. I see your point, but just to kind of sum all of this up, I do feel like this game is being overlooked, not just by the national media, but also the Georgia fan base as well. And I feel like this is the perfect preparation game overall, and I don't think we're talking enough about it.
Well, I think part of that is, one, you just look at the totality of the schedule. It's your first time going to Texas as a member of the SEC. At Alabama for the first time since 2020, and the first time it'll be a full fan experience since 2007. So I think when you add those games in there, I know there are people out there that are excited to go to Oxford, Mississippi, and see the Grove for the first time. Who that might be, I don't know. But I think with those kind of games out there, you understand why the excitement is that what it is. But I think as we get closer and get rolling into fall camp and you start to hear players and Kirby talk more about this Clemson game, there's going to be a real excitement there. Yes, people aren't thrilled that it starts at noon, and sure, they've played Clemson before, and Clemson is just not the program of caliber they were a few seasons ago. But this could also be the first of 4 games that they play in Atlanta this year, and I know that there are Georgia fans out there that are hoping they win all 4 of those games.
It's me. I'm the problem. It's me. I'm the one that's excited to go to the Grove. Okay, coming up after this, we're going to do a segment called Dog Bites. We're going to go over a variety of topics. But for now, we want to remind you that DawgNation Daily at Large, that's what I'm going to call it, is presented today by none other than Merriweather and Tharp. I told Connor that I'm at the age now where all of my friends are getting married, and I'm wondering at what age does everyone start getting divorced, so that way when my friends do start getting divorced, because, I mean, statistically it's bound to happen, right? Connor's looked at me like I'm an idiot, but I'm being for real about this. I'm going to send them to our friends at Merriweather and Tharp. I know you've heard Brandon Adams talk about them for years as the Atlanta divorce team, but now they've actually expanded and are Georgia's divorce team. They have offices in Savannah, Peachtree City, and now Athens, and they're also changing the way divorces are handled by catering to your needs. They now offer different levels of service, including DIY for as low as $99, M&T assisted for as low as $1,749, and there's also model M&T, which includes a payment plan and traditional coverage for complex divorces. So no matter where you're at in the process, I invite you to reach out to our friends at Merriweather and Tharp, a proud partner of the Georgia Bulldogs, and you can visit them at thegeorgiadivorceteam.com. Again, that's thegeorgiadivorceteam.com. All right, let's go ahead and talk about some football. We got a lot of things to cover here on Dog Bites. Still love the music. All right, let's start with Jordan Big Baby Hall. The first time I actually met Jordan Hall, he introduced himself as Big Baby. He's going to miss the start of fall camp due to a lower leg injury. He played in 10 games last year, had 10 tackles. I mean, you can really never have enough bodies on the defensive line, but thank goodness Nas Stackhouse, Warren Brinson comes back. What's the likelihood that Jordan Hall is going to be healthy by the time game one rolls around?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things we're going to wait and see on. Obviously, we're going to ask Kirby about this when we get a chance to talk to him next week. I don't expect him to be all that forthcoming on injuries, but I think the real concern here with Jordan Hall, it's not whether or not he's available or not for the Clemson game. I think when you look at injuries in fall camp, and there have been countless examples of this before, this is not a good time, especially for a young player, an ascending player like Jordan Hall, to have an injury, because we know how important fall camp is for players to get in the best shape they possibly can and be the best versions of themselves. Georgia says all the time, we want practice to be harder than the games. August is always the hardest month of practice for these players. And Kirby brought this up at SEC Media Days last week. Michael Williams entered fall camp last year dealing with with a foot injury, coming off of foot surgery. He was not himself for most of that season there. It didn't really look like the Michael Williams we all thought we were getting until that game against Florida State in the bowl game at the end of the year, where he did have some time off and was able to get fully healthy. I wonder if it's going to be something similar here with Jordan Hall, where, you know, he's battling. Yes, he's able to contribute, but this is a guy that was a five-star player and someone who was expected to make a leap this season. And if he's not 100%, that's going to put more on the plates of Nas Stackhouse, of Warren Brinson, of guys like Xavier McLeod, Kristen Miller. And so, yes, you like what you have there. But Georgia's shown that if they're going to win a national championship, they need this defensive line to be great. And I think you need Jordan Hall to step up there and play that way this season. Obviously, he's a different player than Michael Williams. He was not going to play, I think, as much as Michael was expected to a season ago. But not having the best version of Jordan Hall, I think at some point is going to have an impact on this team this season. And the more important thing may not be, in my opinion, getting him to be 100% for that Clemson game, but getting him as close to 100% so that he can make it through the SEC grind and be a difference maker for this team.
We spent a lot of time praising the Georgia defense for the depth chart. So in taking this in a positive way, who does this open the door for?
I think this puts a lot more on the plate of Kristen Miller. He's a guy that a lot of people are excited to see. It sounds like he's had a very great summer for Georgia there. They need him to really emerge now that Jordan Hall has some questions. The other guy that jumps to mind here is Xavier McLeod, the transfer that they bring in from South Carolina. Redshirted there his last year. Obviously, first year in the system, there's going to be an acclimation period. Looked good in the spring game, and I think he's someone now who, with Jordan Hall maybe missing some time here, can really benefit there. One other nugget I just want to follow away, Jordan Thomas, a freshman, maybe hasn't gotten a lot of pub, coming from New Jersey, the great Sopranos state. I think that Jordan Thomas might be a guy that maybe we hear from more than we anticipated because of this Jordan Hall injury.
All right, Sopranos on the DawgNation at Large bingo card, checked off. All right, let's move on. Let's talk about Cortez Smith for a second. Interior offensive lineman, the latest UGA commit, 6'3", 315. He's been starting at the high school level since he was 13 years old. I mean, I think it just all goes back to Stacey Searles and his success in recruiting on the offensive line in state.
Yeah, I don't think that Jeff Sentell makes this comparison lightly, but he has welcomed a lot of the Cedric Van Pran-Granger talk when it comes to Cortez Smith in terms of obviously physical intangibles, but the off-field stuff there as well. And Cedric Van Pran-Granger, you're not going to find a better leader in the Georgia football program under Kirby Smart than what Cedric was for this team in recent years. 42-2 as a starter, 2 national championships, all-SEC player, Jacobs Blocking Trophy Award winner. That Jeff Sentell, a guy who knows Cedric very well and obviously has covered Cortez for a long time, makes that comparison, I think maybe underscores just how big of a recruiting win this is, because he's not a 5-star offensive tackle. He's not a top 100 overall player. But if you're able to go in and beat out a Georgia Tech, beat out a Miami, beat out, I believe, an Auburn for a guy like this, I think that's huge. And when you look at the center position moving forward, Jared Wilson is probably your starting center for this year and next year, and then he'll be off to the NFL. There's a chance for Cortez, much like Cedric before him, to redshirt that first year and as a redshirt freshman step in as a starter. And I think again, whether or not he becomes a player like Cedric Van Pran-Granger, a lot of things are going to have to go right. But that Georgia's able to identify a player like that again, I think is big for Stacey Searles, and it's huge for this program that they're able to keep finding guys that fit that mold.
Yeah, when I saw this commitment, it brought me back to something that Shane Beamer said at SEC Media Days last week when he was talking about the adjustments that Texas and Oklahoma were going to have to make. And he said it really starts with the line of scrimmage. And you look at a guy like Cortez Smith, 6'3", 315, he would potentially be a pretty quick starter at a place like Georgia Tech or a Miami. But the fact that he's going to have to come in a redshirt and sit behind, and this is a big dude. I mean, it's not a small guy that we're talking about. I think it ties into the idea that at the SEC level, you just have bigger guys on the line of scrimmage, and play after play, you've got depth on the line. It's going to come in, and it just makes the SEC what it is. Not to mention Parkview High School offensive linemen tend to have a really good track record at the University of Georgia. Can you name any? We talked about, Jeff Rancour. I said offensive lineman. Oh, hold on. This is so bad. It's John Stinchcomb. John Stinchcomb and his brother Matt Stinchcomb. Who? So, look, I know I snubbed John Stinchcomb earlier this year. That's pretty bad. I was getting it confused with Cody. I was like, wait, no, because Cody went to Chambly. Yeah. So, okay, I got it, though. John, I met him yesterday for the first time. Super nice guy. All right, let's move on to our next one. We've got Best Four here. ACC Media Days is going on right now, and Mike Norvell was asked about whether or not Georgia was one of the best 4 teams, and this is what he had to say. I believe we have the quote here. They asked Mike Norvell about Sankey's comments that UGA was a top 4 team that didn't make the playoff, but SEC didn't complain. He gave a big response. He said, I don't disagree that Georgia was one of the top 4 teams if you're judging off talent and ability, but they also earned their loss. That was part of the result of what happened on the field. When you look at our team and what it was, we controlled the things we could control. We unfortunately had an injury, but we had a team that responded to it. Everybody can have an opinion of what happened. I don't disagree they were one of the best 4 teams, but what happened on the field kept them out of the playoff. I actually think he makes a few fair points here, but I think the thing that I notice is that he said we had a team that responded to it. Well, their team didn't respond in the Orange Bowl. Well, he didn't have a team that could respond to it. But they could have. Could have, sure. I get what Mike Norvell is saying, and I do think he's right. Georgia earned their loss last year, and I stand by it. Sure, Georgia was one of the 4 best teams in the sport last year in terms of talent. But at the end of the season, they didn't deserve to be in the college football playoff. They lost to Alabama as a favorite in that game. And while I fall on the line that I thought Florida State should have been in the college football playoff, yes, I understand the injury to Jordan Travis altered their season, but you have to reward on-field play. Alabama lost to Texas at home. Florida State won every game on their schedule. And yes, Alabama was, I think, at the end of last year, a better team. But the games have to matter. And I think that Mike Norvell is kind of subtly hinting to that there. You know, how Florida State handled everything after that, I'm sure if you got Mike Norvell to be honest with you, he'd probably agree that he didn't love the way everything went down, especially that Orange Bowl with how things played out. But I think as well, again, the biggest thing and my biggest takeaway has always been the games have to matter. That Orange Bowl certainly mattered to Georgia. It didn't to Florida State, and that's unfortunate, I think, for college football. Again, we still have to continue to talk about this, whereas I think if Florida State just takes that game seriously, I still think Georgia wins. But it's not 63-3, and it has not been this long-tail conversation that we continue to have about Georgia and Florida State. I'm I'm glad that you bring that up, too, because it's something that even though we're going into a new season, it keeps being brought up. Should the talk about that be done and over, or should it be a conversation that we continue to have?
I think, unfortunately, because of the decision that the College Football Playoff Committee made last year, it has to continue to be a part of the conversation. Florida State had just gotten in and then gotten smoked by Michigan. We're not still talking about this. And sure, to a degree as well, I think if Florida State had taken that game seriously in the Orange Bowl, maybe we're not talking about it either. But the games have to matter, and I think the College Football Playoff Committee making that point and saying, well, yeah, the games kind of matter to some teams like a Georgia, but they don't matter to a Florida State, has necessitated a deeper look at the College Football Playoff Committee in terms of what they value and how they go about selecting teams for the College Football Playoff.
All right, on to the next. This tweet was shared with us by our fabulous producer, Cody Chapins, and I'm so glad. There's a tweet here. It says, SEC Media Days media crew may want to rethink how they place the Longhorn logo in the years to come with their digital backgrounds. I really just wanted to find a way to incorporate this into the show because it was too good. The thing is, there's no violation for horns down this year. Who do you think is going to be the first team to do it?
The easy team to say is Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Just because it's a rivalry game. They play relatively early on in the season. I don't know Texas's schedule off the top you my head.
They open with Mississippi State for the SEC.
That's their okay. Mississippi State's not good
but
enough
it's
to do
at
that.
Texas too.
Mississippi State seems like the team that would kind of pull that kind of a move. And
You've got nothing to lose.
Oh yeah, all credit to them to do so. But I'm gonna take the safe answer here and say Oklahoma will do it.
I actually also had Oklahoma on my list, but then there's another team that they kind of play mid-season, and I could just see someone from the Florida Gators hitting one of those horns down. I don't know why. I think it's just because I have very low expectations for their team. Again, a team that really has nothing to lose, so I could see Florida giving them the
I see it now. Florida scores a late touchdown to maybe try and tie the game.
Yeah.
Player throws horns down. The longer extra point, they miss it. They lose the game. That's kind of perfect all around.
I do love that there's no violation, though, for it being in the SEC now. I imagine that we're going to get a lot of those, so we'll see who's the first team to do it. I think Oklahoma's a great guess, but I also I think Florida might be the dark horse pick here, and that's the only thing they're going to be a dark horse pick for this season. All right, last one. It's Olympics time. Every year when the Olympics comes every 2 years and in the summer every 4, I get super patriotic. Okay. And I'm even wearing red for it today. But it is important to note that UGA has over 33 ties to the Summer Olympics. Some of them are not on the USA team, but I mean, that's a lot of people across all different sports. But I think the one I'm most excited to see is Edwards and the men's USA basketball team.
Yeah, the men's USA basketball team hasn't necessarily been lighting the world on fire in some of their tune-up games. South Sudan went down to the wire. Germany needed some late heroics from LeBron there. I think as a basketball fan, Anthony Edwards is someone who's going to, I think, be one of Team USA's 5 best players. He thinks he's not number 5. He thinks he's number 1. And I'm interested in, and I hope we see some tight competitive games because I kind of don't love this Team USA basketball team as a whole because of a certain additional big man that has French citizenship but is playing for Team USA for probably the only time in his career and also happens to play for the Philadelphia 76ers, a team I don't care all that much for. But spinning it around here, Kaylee, with the Olympics in the air, is there an event or sport where if you could win a gold medal in, what would that be?
Do I have to use the athletic ability that I have now, or would this be the dream?
You get to theoretically be the best in the world at that event.
I think I have to go gymnastics because it is my favorite event out of all of them. And just not only the talent that you have to partake in those events, but also you have to have a certain physical stature. You have to be on the shorter side. My size 10 feet are not fitting on that dang balance beam. So I think also knowing that I couldn't do it because of just the way I was built, and it's so impressive. And there's so many good gymnastics programs. I would love to be on the team with Simone Biles, and I think it would have to be the Olympic gymnastics team. I want to win a gold medal with them.
Okay, so we've got some foot talk there. I've got 2, and it's in the same sport realm. 1, 200-meter butterfly. I think that is, in terms of just physically demanding swimming events. I love swimming. Swimming is my favorite event at the Olympics. That one really stands out, and I enjoy that one a lot. The other one, the 1500 freestyle, because that's you're swimming a mile in a pool. Katie Ledecky dominates the women's version of that so much so that she wins by a large margin. If you're telling me I could win by a similarly large margin in an event like that where you were swimming I believe I'm doing the math, 30 laps in a 50-meter pool. Like, just the mental strength required to dominate that event, I think is really outstanding. And so those would be the two swimming-related events that jump to mind for me.
I'm going to do an Uno reverse to make this come to a close. Who is the best athlete across any USA team that's in the Olympics? Who's the best U.S. Olympic athlete competing this year?
I mean, history would tell us that it's Simone Biles, but given what happened to her in Tokyo, I think there's some question about what we're going to see from her. And I think she's one of the more fascinating Olympians at this event. But I mentioned her earlier. I think it's Katie Ledecky, just a dominant swimmer. I think she's got a chance to get close potentially to Michael Phelps' record in terms of all-time gold medals at the event. And again, I'm a self-described swimming head, so I very much enjoy and look forward to those events.
I've actually heard rumors that CKS is a big Katie Ledecky fan.
Okay.
All right, and that is going to be Dog Bites. We're not going to have an SEC through today, but we still want to remind you guys that this is Cruising Around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. I think there's a lot of confusion out there that Brandon is still on a cruise. I'm here to confirm that Brandon is not on the cruise, but we're really excited to see what he has to say when he gets back, because DawgNation will be taking Utopia of the Seas for the DawgNation cruise. Connor, are you coming?
It's still up in the air.
Which means it's probably not going to happen. But maybe after watching this video, he'll be convinced, because Utopia of the Seas is the newest Oasis-class ship. It's taking 3- and 4-night sailing. It's a little bit more convenient, and it's going out of Port Canaveral. But the cool thing about it is that it features so many new things that we haven't seen on Royal Caribbean cruise ships yet, including the Pesky Parrot Caribbean Tiki Bar. I know Brandon was really excited about that. And then they have a bunch of original production shows, including high diving, slacklining, and acrobatics at the Aqua Theater, which I got to watch on last year's DawgNation cruise. That would be something I would like to win a gold medal in. And then they've got ice skating at Studio B and theatrical productions at the Royal Theater. If you have not signed up for the DawgNation cruise yet, we would love to see you there. And even if you can't go on your own Royal, or you can't go on the DawgNation cruise, you can go on your own one by contacting Jessica Slater at 770-718-9147 or jslater@dreamvacations.com. Again, that's 770-718-9147 or jslater@dreamvacations.com. So last week there were a lot of questions about what happened at the SEC Championship, whether that was going to be motivation going into this season. And Kirby Smart was pretty crystal clear in how he felt about that. We played it earlier in the show, but we're going to remind you, this is what Kirby Smart had to say about that.
We're dealing with new challenges this year. We don't have a chip on our shoulder in terms of people trying to use that as motivation. I've never used a failure from the previous year as motivation, and I've never used the success of a previous year as motivation. We won't do that this year. That's not who we are. We want to recreate ourselves, to say, in the best light we can. And this team has been fun to coach.
Okay, Connor, let me ask you this. Is this all bark, no bite?
I think Kirby is not telling the full truth here. I understand not using one loss to Alabama last year as a way to motivate an entire season. Season's too long for that. You got too many good teams to play. You can't, for an entire season, rely on one game to sort of give you the motivational fuel that you need. But I'm sorry, you're just not telling the truth if you're telling me that, especially when they go visit Alabama on September 28th, that you're not thinking about last year and what happened in that game. I know, look, Kirby Smart is a master of motivation for when time comes to use it. You think to that Tennessee game in 2022, how I think he played a big role in getting his team fired up to dominate that game the manner in which they did, rain or not. With the way that game played out last year, and look, we already know in talking to some of the players from that team, whether it be Carson Beck, Tate Ratledge, Micah Morris, they've all said in some way, yeah, that loss to Alabama still lingers, and that still is on our minds in some way. I'm not saying it needs to motivate you throughout the entire offseason to go a little bit farther or give a little bit more. But to say that we don't let that game define us or give us a chip on your shoulder, I guarantee you behind closed doors September 28th, that week, they're going to bring up that 27-24 loss to Alabama. Not so much because I think it was another loss to Alabama, but because of the way that it played out. Where late defensively, they weren't able to get a stop. They, in my opinion, got pushed around in the line of scrimmage for the first 3 quarters of that game, especially after Amarius Mims went out. Offensively, they were giving a rather listless performance after that first drive until really the start of the fourth quarter there. So I just have a lot of questions about, how Georgia's going to use that game. And I understand Kirby using his time there to take that stand and say, hey, that loss last year doesn't impact who we are this year. I think that's maybe largely true for the course of the entirety of this team and the entirety of this season. But when it comes to Alabama, I just don't think that you can play that card. That game has to stick in your mind and mean something a little bit more, given the Georgia-Alabama history of late.
Yeah, I think forgetting the outcome of that game is one of those things, it's a lot easier said than done. And I do think the motivation might be more player-specific, especially for someone like Carson Beck, who just had a tremendous season, especially in the second half, and that would have been a good way to propel him to that next level. But Jalen Milroe was the clutchest quarterback in that game, and that's hard to forget. So I definitely think that this could also be more internal motivations for player-specific. I like the way that Kirby went about this, especially on that platform, too, because it's like I don't want to spend all this time talking about that loss that we had last year. But again, I think forgetting is a lot easier said than done.
And you know, in fairness to Kirby, look, he got asked a number of Alabama-related questions. Nick Saban, Tavares Robinson, Kaylee Mansell, all on that sort of big media platform there. Alabama's not getting asked any questions about Georgia, and that doesn't come up. And obviously part of that is because Kaylee Mansell is the new head coach there. But even if Nick Saban were still in charge of Alabama, I don't think that Georgia's the same level of conversation with Alabama that Alabama is when it comes to Georgia.
Would you say that he's tired of talking about it, or maybe wired, perhaps?
Oh, I think he's very tired of talking about it.
All right, speaking of tired or wired, this is one of the segments that we do on our usual DawgNation at Large show. This is Tired or Wired. I think based on the video component, you can probably get the gist of what this is. But I actually learned about Tired or Wired from Connor's Twitter account. Would you like to explain further in depth what this means?
Yeah, it's just a common meme these days where like tired is maybe sort of like something that's out of thought. We don't want to talk about this anymore. It's too big. It's too mainstream. Wired is maybe like a deeper level take or something you're more excited about when it comes to a certain topic.
Yeah, so we each have 2 for both categories, and then we're also going to bring in Cody Chapins. He's going to participate with us because it would not be a true DawgNation at Large show if we didn't have a special guest appearance from Cody. So I'm going to go first on this. I'm going to give you my Wired. This might be the only time over the course of my entire life that I've actually been happy for the University of Tennessee, because they are now going to be UT and Texas is going to become Tex, T-E-X. I love this because last week I could have made this one of my tireds. We spent so much time talking about Texas and Oklahoma, but more specifically Texas. Let's just say the SEC was very welcoming to Texas. But I think by doing this, you're paying homage to the real UT, the UT that's been in the SEC for all this time. And so it's weird for me to say that, like, I'm happy for Tennessee in the same sentence, but I'm glad that they didn't just hand this to Texas on a silver platter.
They got this wrong.
Oh, my gosh.
Texas is the real UT. I'm not giving Tennessee that. I'm sorry. You got this wrong, too, technically, I guess.
There is no right or wrong answer.
That sounds like something a Texas fan would say.
Okay, let's go to my tired. I'm so tired, I'm not even going to talk about it. You guys can just read the caption because I'm tired of it.
Why
All
are
right.
you tired?
Can't you read?
No.
You're a Georgia graduate and you can't read?
No.
All right, I'm in here. I'm going to give you my first Wired. I don't know if you guys saw this, the UGA football equipment. They're a great follow on Instagram, but they dropped the newest UGA cleats that are coming out for the Clemson game. This is definitely a Wired for me. As you check it out, they'll show them right here. One thing that Georgia has not done a lot of since they did away with the helmet stickers was do a lot with the bones, and you got bones on these. These are pretty sweet-looking cleats. So you guys were talking about the Clemson game, how excited you are for that game. That gets me all jacked up for that game as well. And then my Wired, I don't know if you guys saw this online, talking about media days. Big Ten had their media day yesterday, and the UCLA coach, I'll just let you listen to what he had to say.
Football-wise, we're just excited. You know, I'm sure you guys don't know too much about UCLA, but our football program, but we're in LA. It's us and USC.
Like, come on, man. What is he doing? that tells me everything I need to know about your program. A, what kind of preparation are you doing? If that's what your preparation is, knowing you got to give an opening statement at a media days, I don't care if you're not a talker, right? I need you to have preparation and be ready for that moment. So that tells me about your program, what happens when you get on the field on a Saturday afternoon. Are you going to be prepared the way you should be? And also, who are the folks around him? Who are his media people? Who is his Claude Felton? He's got to have, if he's not going to write something, you write something for him and make sure he's prepared. That's it. That's my soapbox. And how is he going to look at him? Can he walk into a recruit's home and give that kind of speech? No. You got to be a coach. You got to have something better. So that is my first tired. Connor?
That's painful to watch. That felt like an SNL skit.
There is only one Claude. Like, UCLA can't have a Claude Felton because there's only one Claude Felton. 2, I actually kind of love that speech that he gave. You can see the moment his brain just sort of like shuts off and stops working, which I find very funny. But he's a football guy. You know, he's not here to give a book report on UCLA. He's here to talk about football. He's here to actually let the media do their job and ask questions instead of filibuster like certain SEC coaches tend to do. Where I can remember back in the day, including a current Georgia analyst, who would just like list his entire roster as a way to like not answer questions. I'm in on Deshaun Foster. I like the direction that UCLA program is going. He's not the first coach to give a poor press conference performance. Nick Sirianni famously did with the Philadelphia Eagles, and he took them to the Super Bowl. So I'm in on this speech. My Wired or Tired, unsurprisingly, deals with college football. We're going to start with my Wired here, talking about CFP Dynasty with your friends. And look, I understand if you're a person out there that doesn't have this game or doesn't enjoy or partake in it, that you don't care about someone's dynasty. You don't care about the recruits. You don't care about how other people about it. It's sort of like people's brackets. It's like people's fantasy football teams. I think you can enjoy that they're in it, but you just don't want to hear about it. But in groups of friends, in group chats where we all have the game, I enjoy talking about it. I enjoy finding out how other teams are doing. I enjoy the misery that comes when points are missed or when interceptions are happening. And that leads me into my tired, which is, this game is hard. This game is not fun. Maybe you've seen Scott Van Pelt talk about it. Maybe you've seen Big Cat talk about this. Look, if you're playing this game and you're trying to get good at it, it has been a struggle. If you find a way to get really good at this game on Heisman, like all the credit in the world to you. I've gotten my butt kicked. I've missed more extra points and field goals than I care to admit. It's really difficult. And while, yes, you just got to play the game and get your 10,000 hours in, I think there are a lot of people excited that this game came back. I don't think there are a lot of people that are all that excited about how hard this game is.
I like your Wired. As a Kennesaw State grad, this is the most attention that Kennesaw State has had probably ever. It's going to be so nice now when I say, hey, I went to Kennesaw State, and they're like, hey, that's my dynasty team. So I like the Wired here. All right, I'll do my next one's Wired. This is technically the last weekend without football for the rest of this year because NFL preseason and high school football scrimmages start next Friday. We spent so much time over the last few months just talking about things and waiting on things to get here. Well, they're finally here, and that brings me a lot of joy knowing that I'm going to be able to get on the X app and see what people are saying about football, and it's just a sign that better times are near, Connor.
This isn't the last weekend without football. There's still like 4 more weeks until college football.
But I mean, that's why it doesn't say without college football, and it just says without football.
I want real football. Scrimmages, preseason games, I want real football.
Okay, well, I'm sure that everyone right now that's watching would disagree. We're just glad to have some football back. Beggars can't be choosers. All right, tired. Picking Vanderbilt to win the SEC. Not one, but 2 people. It's like the blind leading the blind. I get it. You do it one time. It's funny. Ha, ha, ha. It's not funny anymore. If I voted and I didn't think that UGA was going to be the winner of the SEC championship, you know what? I wouldn't vote for them because that's our job. That's what we do. I can't even imagine the conversation because I imagine that 2 people said, hey, if I'll do it, or if you do it, then I'll do it. Like, I can't imagine, I mean, you and I share half a brain cell, but like, these guys have no brain cells. It's beyond me that 2 professionals in the industry could still pick Vanderbilt to win the SEC. And thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
So I'm going to go Brandon Adams here. I have a conspiracy theory with this. I think these 2 media members were not in cahoots, but they thought it would be funny if they were the only person to vote for Vanderbilt. And because 2 of them did it, it actually makes it less funny. Whereas like the one person who picked South Carolina to win it all, I think is funnier and better gauge the system than being the person that said, oh, I'm going to pick Vanderbilt to try and be funny here.
Well, that's because Brandon has a conspiracy theory for everything.
Mm-hmm.
His legacy still lives on even here.
All right, my next wired. I'm still wired from yesterday. We had the Players Roundtable. We had the aforementioned John Stinchcomb. We did not have Matt Stinchcomb, man, but we had John Stinchcomb in the house. We had Terrence Edwards and Jake Fromm. It was a great time. If you missed that, go back on our DawgNation YouTube channel later on today. Click on that walkthrough. We talked so much in depth about this season and what could happen. And then we also got to relive some of the glory days. Some of the names those guys brought up was just so much fun. Talking about that 2002 SEC championship team. And, they gave a shout out to Tony Gilbert and Tim Wansley. It was really, really cool. All right, my other my tired, I was looking at ACC Media Days to see what Clemson's talking, what they're going to say about Georgia. And then it just kind of hit me. I had kind of wrapped my mind around this new Big Ten, which is ridiculous, from Rutgers to Southern California. But the ACC is also doing this. You got Cal and Stanford and SMU now in the Atlantic Coast Conference. I don't know. I can deal with the Big Ten maybe, but the new look ACC already. Hadn't even started yet, already tired.
Yeah, I was going through some transcripts from ACC Media Days the other day, and I saw Ashton Daniels, former Buford quarterback, on there. I'm like, did he transfer? I knew he was at Stanford last year. And then I was like, oh, wait, Stanford's now in the ACC. And so that sort of speaks to that. One, I do want to shout out Cody's roundtable that he executed yesterday. That was incredibly well done. And I'm going to try and earn as many brownie points as I can because what I'm about to do next, I don't think is going to endear me to one of my co-hosts. My wired and tired are sort of similar. My wired, the way that Kaylee looks at Cody when she gets to host with him, they did a fantastic job last week at SEC Media Days down there in Dallas, Texas. Great job filling in for Brandon Adams. I'm sure he's going to give him the same kudos. Look at that photo. Look how happy she is. She's had her coffee. She's ready to go. She's excited to what he has to say, sort of selling the show. The tired is the way that Kaylee looks at me when we are co-hosting with each other. She's like, oh man, he's talking, he's going for a long time. I'm giving my Brandon Adams listening face impression. I'm just ready to go back and talk. I'm sure there's some SEC bald person that I can talk to try and earn some brownie points with them. So wired the way she looks at Cody when she's co-hosting with him, tired the way that she looks at me. Look at that great side-by-side there depicting the range of emotions that Kaylee Mansell can display.
I understand it.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure how to feel about this. I enjoy my time with both of you. Obviously, I get to spend a lot more time doing this with you, and then Cody and I had that opportunity last week. Now, you said I probably had my coffee. I was probably 8 cups of coffee in at this point, but Cody's a funny guy. And sometimes...
So I'm not funny. That's tough.
Sometimes you are.
That's tough.
Sometimes. But...
We'll blame it on the Dr. Pepper Creamy Coconut.
Yeah.
We had just done a taste test right at that when that picture was taken. Maybe that was...
That's actually not true. That was the day before. But
yeah, well,
that was see, Cody comes in and tries to save me right here. So maybe that's why.
I guess I need some Dr. Pepper to fall out of a coconut tree.
Okay, that is going to wrap up Tired or Wired. And before we get to the end, we do want to remind you that we spent the first half talking about the game at Clemson. The worst part about that game to me is that it's a noon kickoff. I am very open about how I am not a huge fan of noon games, but one thing that does make it more tolerable and makes it more exciting is that we are going to do a DawgNation invasion at Clemson. So come celebrate with all of DawgNation at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. We're going to have a whole breakfast thing figured out. Bloody mimosas. That was awful. Mimosas, Bloody Marys. That's how excited I am about it. And you can get your tickets at DawgNation.com/tailgate. The game is quickly approaching, so don't procrastinate this. Go ahead and get your ticket now so we can all celebrate the start of the season with one another. All right. With that, this is DawgNation Daily at Large. And okay, there we go. The music's going. So Connor got on me the other day about he had a golden shoe that he wanted to do. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm super excited to award my first ever golden shoe to Mary Beth Smart. Kirby Smart mentioned at SEC Media Days last week. I don't know why this hasn't been covered on the program yet, but that Mary Beth Smart took their 2 twins to a Taylor Swift show in Amsterdam. Kirby did not go. Kirby is much more of a Mississippi and Cooperstown, New York travel person. Mary Beth Smart taking her kids to a Taylor Swift show. Unbelievable flex. Mom of the Year nomination for this move alone. Her 3 favorite songs, according to Mark Weiser of the Athens Banner-Herald: Delicate, All Too Well, and Love Story. No word on if All Too Well is a 10-minute version or the 5-minute version. But Mary Beth Smart, you are a Golden Shoe winner for being the Mom of the Year and taking your kids to Taylor Swift.
I like that. I'm glad that we let you have your moment in the spotlight. I know you wanted to get that off your chest. You know who doesn't have a mom as cool as Mary Beth Smart? It's those lousy, stinking Gators. It's been 1,356 days since the Florida Gators have beaten Georgia Bulldogs. And with that, that will wrap up today's show. Thank you so much for joining us. Even thank you, Connor, for joining us in person today. And we'll see you right back here tomorrow. It's our last show without Brandon Adams. I'm glad for him to come back. I know you guys are as well. But with that, this is DawgNation Daily. And on video time now for the R.S. Sanders cool down. R.S. Sanders, when you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs, they show up on time. Do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. You can trust them on all of that. I guess we're going to take some comments, but if I would be lying if I said I wasn't a little bit terrified. Do you want to help? Would you like to participate, Cody?
Well,
you can help as well.
As we established earlier, I can't read. So. As DawgNation Daily at Large canon, I cannot read. So
Cody, if you would like to help me with this, that would be fantastic. Like I said, I'm a little scared.
Yeah, I'll log on here and see what everybody's saying. Good morning to everybody. Thanks for watching DawgNation at Large. A little bit different, a little bit fun.
Yeah. No, this is what we do every Thursday night at 7 o'clock. We're always just trying to bring something different to the table. Usually start in the beginning with the big headlining story, try to do something different, and then we always like to do something fun at the end just to switch things up. So I know a lot of you guys miss BA, especially in the YouTube comments, but BA is to take time away too. And I hope that y'all can see that this week that we really tried to put together something for y'all, because we usually have done tape shows in the past, but with him being gone for 2 weeks, it doesn't make sense to tape something out so far in advance. So I know you guys are excited that he's going to come back, as am I.
Yeah, Paul Parker on YouTube just said he appreciates us having a show during this kind of dead time. And that was the goal. You're right. Sometimes Brandon, occasionally when he goes on vacation, he'll put something in the can, but we knew there was going to be so much going on with SEC Media Days and new things coming out, and we wanted to keep it fresh, and this was our way this week of keeping it fresh. We had the roundtable with Connor and Mike on Monday. Of course, we had the Players Roundtable. We had the Brandon Adams Tell-All, which I think was a lot of fun to just kind of hear his stories about growing up as a Georgia fan, because I think we all have that moment. We're not all here hanging out at DawgNation.com if we didn't all have those moments that kind of made us, really love Georgia and really want to be around it. So it was really good to do that. And then tomorrow, normally we get Jeff Sintel on a Friday anyway, so we're just going to have Before the Hedges on because he'll talk for 30 minutes just with his interview with Brandon, so it's going to be great to have him on and talk some recruiting tomorrow.
With Jeff on tomorrow, can you make sure in honor of BA you ask him about defensive line recruiting, because that obviously matters to Brandon dearly in this class, and then 2, wide receiver recruiting, because I feel like that is something he brings up time to time as well with Jeff.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think I can manage doing that. Yeah, I'll be on with Justin Tell tomorrow. I get to sit in on his Wednesday night show Before the Hedges all the time. So I'm excited to finally get in front of the camera with Jeff, because he was actually one of the first people that I started with. All right, I'm going to go to DawgNation.com. I see a lot of people talking about how cool the cleats are that they're going to use. I think those are pretty sick.
Yeah, I think they're sick. I think one thing I do want to make a correction here. Another one of our lovely coworkers, BJ Sweeney, is on vacation this week. However, he just messaged me to inform him. I'll own up to this. I said 2 twins. Kirby Smart just has 1 pair of twins, Weston and Julie. And so I would just like to correct myself there for that. Just, no.
Pete Thrillkill on Facebook says, in his personal opinion, Connor, one of the best commentators we have on the show. So Pete is a big Connor fan. He's a little more honest and doesn't worry about being politically correct. So there you go, Connor. Shout out from Pete on Facebook.
Thank you, Pete. We only have like 4 or 5 commenters, or I guess analysts, whatever. So I'll take one of the best in that regard. Maybe I prefer the best, though. But I know that I'm not, so, that's just something.
And we actually have a Facebook commenter. Al says you guys are like brothers and sisters the way you pick at each other, which is a nice change from the Facebook crowd.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Somebody.
Have you lost it? You haven't read a single comment.
I'm trying to. I'm being very careful about the words that I put out. on air.
Rich says BA might be in trouble with what we've been doing this week. BA ain't going anywhere.
No.
BA is just fine. We all bow down. He does an incredible. We know we can't be BA. We just try and fill in the blanks when he's gone. So BA ain't going anywhere.
No,
yeah,
not at all.
I don't know if I feel like when BA finally gets the time to go back and watch the Players Roundtable, he's going to be really sad that he missed out on that.
Yeah, I mean, look, birdies have told me he's very excited to get back to work and start things up on Monday.
I haven't even heard from him at all. So the fact that you've got that speaks volumes.
Now, Brandon and I are more than just coworkers.
Is that so?
That is so.
All right, I'm going over to Facebook. I'm terrified.
I thought we established I was the one that couldn't read.
I can read. I'm choosing not to read certain things. Actually, if Cody wants to continue leading this conversation, that would be great, so you can filter them out. Usually my grandmother helps me filter out the comments that I should and shouldn't read.
Jay Shipes on YouTube says that Pete that is on Facebook must be Connor's burner. So,
nah.
Very possible. I haven't seen him in there, but maybe Connor's. You got family watching, Connor, that's tweeting for you?
Not today, but my mom will probably go back and watch it after the fact.
So give us a nice comment, Connor's mom.
Yeah.
Oh, I just found out Marshall Fleming on Facebook just let us know that we can't get hooked on the creamy coconut. It's only seasonal, so they're going to stop selling it in July. Cody,
we're gonna have to
bulk order it.
Yeah, you're gonna have it stacked in the dog.
Yeah.
Like Doomsday Dr. Pepper.
Yeah.
So yeah, you'll look at me and we'll see. You'll say, "What are all those crates back there?" And it'll be all the creamy coconut we've stockpiled.
I don't think I've ever had Dr. Pepper.
Dina Pruitt on. Oh, that. First off, shame on you,
Cody.
Dina Pruitt again, jumping in to save you, Connor.
Yeah.
Dina Pruitt on YouTube says, "Kaylee, have you tried the pineapple finish long drink?" I was not aware there was a pineapple.
No, I actually just found out on Saturday. Jeff Sintel sent me a picture of it, and I love pineapple flavored things, so I think my exact words to Jeff were, "This is my dream drink." So my plan is to get my hands on it this week, but I'm just now finding out with you guys that this is even a thing. I'm gonna have to get into contact with Finish Long Drink, so maybe what Brandon is to Royal Caribbean, I can be to long drink. So I love to advocate.
Don't think I've had a Finish Long Drink ever. Either.
See, how is your overall quality of life?
Have you lived, Connor?
I live a very boring lifestyle.
Matt Presley actually wanted to ask a football question. Talking about the defense, the front seven, how do we think they're going to be this year? Do you think, because he felt like it was a weakness last year, I'll let you guys kind of weigh in on what you think about the defensive front.
I think that the linebacker play is going to be much improved this year. And I think, the defensive line, for a variety of reasons, has borne, I think, the brunt of criticism this offseason. But at the end of last year, Small Wonder was playing on a broken foot. Jamon Dumas-Johnson was out for the year with a broken arm. C.J. Allen and Raylan Wilson, while they were both promising freshmen, I just don't think we're ready for that level of workload yet. Georgia didn't really want to play Jalen Walker at inside linebacker a season ago. 4 of those guys are back. You bring in Justin Williams, you bring in Chris Cole to develop better depth there as well. I think the inside linebacker play is going to be much improved, and I think that's going to help the defensive line a good bit more. Obviously there are going to be questions about this Georgia defensive line in 2024. I don't think it's going to get to the 2021 level just because they don't have that level of raw talent. But I do think that there's a world where you can get that 2022 level of defensive line play, and if they're able to do that, I think they're going to be pretty successful on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, kind of going off that last comment, Paul Moon says we got to have someone step up in the middle. Inside linebacker play was hindered from mid-interior D-line. I think the ends will be better, though.
I actually push back on that a little bit. I think that injuries and youth were the reason that the inside linebacker play suffered a year ago, not so much because of the lack of star power in the middle of that defense.
They're also saying that Tennessee doesn't deserve anything.
I feel very confident. I refuse to acknowledge Tennessee as the real UT.
So when you're writing articles for the website, are you going to be referring to Texas as UT?
No, I'm going to spell out Texas because it's 5 letters.
It was a fair question. All right.
DT on DawgNation.com says, dang, size 10 feet? Kayla would make a great swimmer with the built-in flippers.
I'm not going to lie. I'll get a little, personal. I used to be really insecure and embarrassed about this, right? Because my foot just grew at a more rapid rate than everyone else around me. But now I fully embrace it. One of my favorite words to use around the office, they know I like the word curb stomp. if I need to curb stomp somebody with my size 10 feet, I totally can. And the only thing that it really hinders me from doing is gymnastics, like we talked about earlier. So,
A lot of foot talk this morning. I think this might be a record for foot talk on DawgNation Daily, or at least in this 10 o'clock time slot. Although I guess a few years ago there were a rash of foot injuries at Georgia, and there were a lot of questions about, well, why are there so many foot injuries? So maybe that was the last time that we had spoken this much about feet in this time slot.
Yeah, we are not a Quentin Tarantino movie.
I'd be a lot cooler if we were. Do you have a favorite Quentin Tarantino movie? This is tough. That she doesn't automatically know the answer is tough.
Especially, too, because he hasn't really made that many movies either.
He's made 9.
Yeah, and then his 10th will be his final one, right?
It better
the
not
plan?
Be. It better not be. That is his plan.
Dang, that's so hard. I mean, Pulp Fiction's a classic, but... Dang. I was not prepared to answer a question of this level of difficulty.
Our favorite
today.
Tarantino movie?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm going to go Reservoir Dogs.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. Not my favorite.
Maybe Inglourious Bastards.
Pulp Fiction is his best movie. Inglourious Bastards is my favorite, especially to rewatch.
Yeah. I also liked Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Not up there with the Pulp Fictions, Reservoir Dogs, and Inglourious Bastards, but still solid and adapting to the new world of movies, and I like the cast of it. That's probably not what you guys are here to listen to us talk about.
Matt
but
Rukavina goes Grindhouse.
Ooh, that's a good pick. Wasn't a big fan of Django.
Oh, I like Django.
I watched that with my dad, and it was very uncomfortable.
Bradley Spalding asking what wide receiver can fill Ladd McConkey's shoes, and we talked a lot about that on the Players Roundtable yesterday. It was really cool to hear from Terrence Edwards, who knows all of these guys, it seems like. To me, it's got to be Dom Lovett is going to be kind of that little guy who can find some space and get the first down. What do you guys, any thoughts from you guys on who can be Ladd?
No one can be Ladd. Like, there's only ever going to be one Ladd McConkey. But in terms of scheme, replicableness, if that's a word, Dom Lovett jumps to mind there. However, I think in terms of a guy that is going to take a lot of designed runs, handoffs, end-arounds, I think Dillon Bell might be that guy for Georgia this year. We saw it in the Alabama game. It didn't go great when they tried it there with him. But I think now that they've had a full offseason, I think one of the maybe undercovered stories certainly this year is with Georgia just being in a better spot from a health standpoint at the running back position. That's going to allow Dillon Bell to play wide receiver full-time more, and I think that's going to be huge for his development. This time a year ago, and because of the injuries at running back, they were playing him a lot at running back early in the season. You saw him play a big role in that South Carolina win. But I do think in a way that didn't necessarily let him develop to the best of his abilities at wide receiver. Now with a full offseason doing so, we know Malachi Starks spoke highly of him last week. I think Dillon Bell is poised for a really big season for Georgia.
I'm curious, Connor, because we keep talking about all the wide receivers, and you talk about Anthony Evans and Dillon Bell and Arian Smith, I feel like you've got all these chances for gadget plays. You can't get them all in. You're not going to run 4, different little gadget plays. So do you feel like some of those guys, they're going to get their one shot, and that's going to be, the one try, even if it's like London Humphreys coming in and we had something specifically drawn up for him? Or how do you fit all of that in?
Right. I think maybe one of the things that's gone maybe a little undercovered with this wide receiver room is, yes, it's so deep, and that's a positive, especially from where Georgia's been in recent years with this position. But some of the guys that we talk about are kind of just not going to get the opportunity to do things because, again, there's only one football. And so someone like an Arian Smith or a Ra Thomas, a London Humphreys, who was seen as a big transfer portal addition, Anthony Evans is someone who's obviously generated a lot of buzz this offseason. One or two of those guys are just going to have a more quiet year than I think people anticipate. And it'll be interesting to see how those guys go about establishing themselves. I think we feel really good about Lovett and Bell being serious contributors. How things break down between Colby Young and Ra Thomas, who have somewhat similar skill set there, I think is going to be interesting. Arian Smith and Anthony Evans as well, sort of those speedsters on the outside. Not all these guys are going to get playing time that they envision and get the role I think that a lot of people think they possibly can.
Yeah, I saw a lot of people this last week in the comments saying that we haven't talked enough about Arian Smith. I mean, he is the speedster. We saw that on the college football rankings. Like, how much of a real impact does he actually make this season?
I think it's a big question. Look, this is his 5th year in the program, and one of the things we had said in the past was that, if Arian Smith can be healthy, he can be a real impact player for Georgia because that's just what we had seen in the small sample sizes. He was healthy all year last year and arguably had perhaps his most disappointing season, given the expectations that he entered with, especially coming off that Ohio State game. So I understand why people can be leery of Arian Smith hype, but by all accounts, he had a great spring. He's continued to work hard in the summer, and I think that there's a chance this year, if he's able to capitalize in it, get past some of the drops issues he had a season ago, really finally emerge as the guy who did what he did in the Ohio State game on a more consistent basis.
Why do you think it is that he hasn't been able to meet this level of expectation that people have had for him?
So much of it is injury, and not just the fact that he misses games, but because of that he misses practice. And Todd Monken talked about this a long time ago. Because of that missed time, he just hasn't had the ability to develop as a well-rounded wide receiver because of it. And then last year, he just struggled with drops, and that happens. Ladd McConkey had drops issues when he was a sophomore. And so this is just something I think a lot of wide receivers, unless you're a Jerry Rice or a Randy Moss, just sort of go through at times in their career. And Arian seems to have gotten through it. He made a big catch in that game against Alabama when they threw it to him deep. And I think there's a lot of interest. And if he's able to go out there and play and contribute consistently, having that level of speed threat is going to open up so many things for Georgia underneath, that even just the constant presence of an Arian Smith could really help this offense.
And we heard Terrence Edwards yesterday talk about Arian's confidence, and he's got that's got to happen early for him. Even in games, just find a way to let him touch the ball, and that can build. Johnny Surf Dog brings in Dusk Till Dawn, Selma Hayek, for his Tarantino pick. That one,
oh my!
The first half is like, and then it gets crazy.
It gets weird.
Every Tarantino movie, but they all get crazy. But, that one gets a little.
That's technically not a Tarantino movie because he did not, in my opinion, because he did not direct it. There are a couple that he has written, obviously True Romance being sort of the big one that's bandied about there. So technically From Dusk Till Dawn does not fall into my personal Tarantino rankings.
I am envisioning the scene, the scene. Not what I was hoping to think about at 11 o'clock in the morning, but Zach Adams on Facebook says he hasn't felt this good about a season since 2021.
Interesting, because Georgia was not seen, I think, certainly as the #1 championship contender, or even necessarily a slam dunk playoff team, given that was a 14 playoff that season. But I think it just speaks to where Georgia is, where they're able to lose so much talent over the last 2 seasons and still go 28-1 in those games.
Yeah, Brandon Adams said something similar to me before he left, that for some reason, I don't know if it was the storylines or Carson Beck coming back or the level of expectation, 12-team playoff, he was like, I've been more excited this is the most excited for a season that I've been in a really long time.
I think part of that is because of Carson Beck, and obviously, look, Stetson, I think Stetson was a great quarterback, but there was always a part of the Stetson conversation that made it tough to talk about him, whereas I think Carson doesn't have that same level of baggage with him, which, that's not fair to Stetson. They're going to put a lot on Carson's shoulders this year in a way I don't think they've ever done with a quarterback, maybe except Jake Fromm in 2019, and I think he was really limited because of the wide receiver play that season. We're bringing up one of Brandon's favorite topics, that 2019 offense. I think that because we're going to see Carson do a lot and be asked to carry a bigger load than we've traditionally seen, that's why I think there's a greater fascination and perhaps a greater hope with this team.
All right, I hate for us to wrap up really soon, but we've got something that we have to tackle after this that's going to premiere in just a few weeks. But usually we end DawgNation at Large by saying what we learned today. I learned that Connor could pull off a surprise. Well, almost.
It was ruined not by me, but one of our coworkers. I learned that Kaylee has size 10 feet.
Okay. I think that's a good note to end the show on. DawgNation, thank you so much for joining us today. Now, this wasn't the typical DawgNation Daily that we do, but this is our usual show that we do on Thursday nights at 7. So if you liked it, make sure to check it out. Next Thursday, we won't have one tonight. Tomorrow, it's going to be me and Justin Tell on a bonus edition of Before the Hedges. We'll talk all things recruiting, and then Brandon Adams is going to be back. So, again, thank you all so much for joining us. If you like what we did here, you can give us a like on YouTube, Facebook. That would be great. But we will see you right back here on the pages of DawgNation tomorrow at 10 a.m.